Hello and welcome back to World of Tanks. Today we're going to be talking about the Turtle Mark 1. I'm going to show you some gameplay to show you what this tank really can do. Then I'll talk statistics and then I'll show you some equipment and field mods that I recommend you should take for this tank. Let's get right into it. So, the Turtle Mark 1, let's have a look at this tank's gameplay. So when I say that this tank is now the best tier 8, I know a few of you will look at me and go, what do you mean? This tank's always been terrible. Well, this tank received a significant buff in the summer of 2023 alongside a number of other tier 8 premiums, and it very much made this tank from one of the worst performing tier 8s to one of the best performing tier 8s in a single patch. This tank had its limitations, and those limitations, all of them, got very much increased. So, when Wargaming took this vehicle and made it into the best tier 8, what did they do? So, they increased its top speed, base, this is all base statistics, from 20 kmh all the way up to 25 kmh, which is a significant increase. That meant that previously, if you ran a turbo on this tank, you could only get it up to 25 kmh. Now, if you run a turbo on this tank, you can get that all the way up to 30 kmh, as you will see the tank going in this gameplay. Reverse speed, similarly, was increased to 12 kmh from 10. That's just a nice little kind of ease of life, quality of life kind of increase. You can just reverse out of a position better. You can stop yourself from being rotated if someone's running around you a little bit easier. Similarly, this tank kind of had its biggest limitation was it had to sit there and stare down an alleyway to be able to hit any shots, because its dispersion during movement and hull traverse was horrendous. Well, that got reduced from 0.25 down to 0.18. Yeah, a decrease of 0.07. That is significant, and it now means that this tank can round corners and not have a pineapple reticle as soon as it comes around the corner. So it's a little bit more accurate upon the initial engagement, doesn't have to sit there and aim. Similarly, this tank, kind of everything that this tank used to struggle at used to limit this tank's DPM. Well, one of the biggest things was its penetration. This tank had really poor penetration. Its penetration got increased from 224 standard all the way up to 240, and its gold pen from 253 up to 270. 270 gold pen, especially as its APCR, is just really nice. It's really comfy. It can pen a lot of plates and a lot of armor at tier 9 and tier 10 when it gets into those up-tiered matchmaking that previously it couldn't. And when you combine that with the fact that this tank is quicker, its hull dispersion upon traverse is better, this tank just got its quality of life improved significantly. It is kind of a little bit idiot-proof now. And just another quality of life change that they decided to do, which it probably didn't need. It probably would have been something to keep this tank relatively balanced, is its shell velocity. It did used to have pretty poor shell velocity, and I reckon if they'd probably kept it, this tank may be a little bit more balanced. But they decided to basically increase the shell velocity probably in the biggest way I've ever seen. The standard shell velocity got increased by 258 meters a second, and the special shell velocity 209, which now means that its standard shell is 1050 meters a second, and its special shell is 1200 meters a second. Yeah, it's a pretty significant increase in shell velocity. So, everything that's been changed basically just turned this tank from being forced to sit on a hull down and aim down an alley and hope that people drove at it, which this tank could do if it was in a, a top tier kind of matchup, like it is in here. But everything that was changed on this tank just kind of turned it into this, hyper aggressive bully. It's now able to drive at opponents quicker, be more accurate when it's driving at the opponents, and have more pen when it gets there to pen its opponents. Yeah, this tank really is, simply put, the best tier 8 now. It really is. And as you can see here, the armor on this tank has always been strong. 250 plus millimeters frontal armor with, a very small lower plate and a tiny cupola. That is the matchup for a very strong tank, especially in today's meta where everything is hull down. snipey cupola kind of based gameplay, this tank does excel at that, and it did used to excel at that once it was in position. What limited this tank and made it, pretty hard to play and not very fun to play was the fact that its DPM wasn't usable. And that is what kept this tank underperforming. And if Wargaming wanted to rebalance this tank, they should have maybe reduced a little bit of that DPM, but increased the gun handling like they have. But instead, they kept the gun handling, they increased the gun handling and kept the DPM the same. Which means that this tank is now packing 3,800 DPM with a very usable gun and and speed to get into position and penetration to pen everything when it's in position. Like, everything about this tank is now just so strong, it's kind of a little bit ridiculous. And as we know, Wargaming don't nerf tier 8 premiums. Wargaming only buff tier 8 premiums when they're underperforming. And if Wargaming were to ever nerf a tier 8 premium, I feel like this is the one they should maybe consider, because the reason why it's so good is not because it was released overpowered, but because they overbuffed it, like they did with the AMX M454 at tier 10. That tank went from underperforming to incredible in one patch, and thankfully Wargaming realised their mistake and they corrected it. And I feel like Wargaming should maybe consider doing the same about this tank, because not only is it very good in the hands of a good player, it's very good in the hands of an average player as well. Anyone can make this tank perform. It's kind of idiot proof. It can get into position, it's got ridiculous DPM, decent gun handling, and the penetration. There is nothing else you really want. And if anything wasn't evidence that this tank is simply overperforming, Daki the Killzor, which I know many of you may know, managed to perform 11,000 damage in this tank. 11,000 damage at tier 8. That is something that people will never perform at tier 10. And he's done it at tier 8 in this tank. It is truly ridiculous. But let me show you what equipment and field mods I recommend for this tank. So let's talk about this tank's equipment and field mods. For your first equipment setup, I recommend you take Hardening Turbo Rammer. You're going to want to be using this on a map where you're going to be brawling. You're going to want to be up close and personal to your opponents. The Hardening will allow you to trade more. Turbo, obviously you get into position quicker. And the Rammer, for this tank's ridiculous DPM. Then for your second setup, after the field mods, I recommend you take Vents, Rammer, and Optics. This is going to be used in some more niche kind of scenarios, probably on a map where you're going to be forced to snipe. The Vents will just generally improve your tank overall. The Rammer, obviously for your DPM, and the Optics is going to allow you to spot for yourself. So, let's talk about this tank's field mods. Well, pretty generic. It's tier 8, so it only has a choice of 3. For your first one, you're going to want to take Reinforced Suspension, which is the left-hand one. Then Parallax Adjustment, which is the right-hand one. And then finally, Right-Angled Periscope, which is the furthest right-hand one. So, let's go on to the conclusion of this video, and I'll give you my overall opinion on this tank and let you know a little bit more about it. So, finally, for this tank, it is obviously a premium tank, so it is obviously going to be available only through purchasing it through gold or real money. Usually, this tank is a pretty common addition to loot boxes. So, for example, the St. Patrick's one, those Mars ones we had last year, and the Waffenträger ones, those kind of keys, the Engineers ones. This tank is usually thrown into those kind of bundles, so if you are looking to pick this tank up, do keep your eye out for it in there. But obviously, do remember, you're not going to be guaranteed to get this tank through those boxes. It is a gambling system, so do bear that in mind. But occasionally, this tank does appear in the premium store, for 30, 35 Great British pounds. So, 35 to 40 euros. So do bear that in mind. But thank you for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, this is a little bit of a new kind of venture for me, trying something new. So if you did, let me know. Did like it, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.